Trump's own lawyer wants to run the Justice Department. Senator Adam Schiff wasn't having it, and what he exposed should scare every American. Stay to the end, and if you stand for real justice, hit subscribe, like, and turn on notifications right now.
Notwithstanding what I've heard from our mutual friends, I am gravely concerned in listening to your testimony, the degree to which you sound like you're still representing Donald Trump as his lawyer. Your criticism of the department, for example, filing a superseding indictment in the January 6th prosecution after a Supreme Court case so that the indictment would conform with that opinion, is the kind of objection I would expect to hear from a criminal defense lawyer, not the kind of statement I would expect to hear from a deputy attorney general. So let me just ask you, you have not been confirmed yet. Are you still Donald Trump's lawyer?
I mean, yes, my attorney-client relationship with President Trump remains. Yes, the cases I was representing him on, to the extent that there's anything going on like the appeal in Manhattan, I'm not part of that.
But you're still representing him as you sit here today.
Well, I mean, representing him, there's no active matters. So
correct, but you're still his lawyer.
I have an attorney-client relationship with President Trump.
And even if you're confirmed and you're no longer representing him as a criminal defendant, even then you still have continuing moral obligations as a member of the bar, legal obligations, to your former client, correct?
Like everybody at the Department of Justice with every one of their former clients.
Correct. So you'd have a continuing duty of loyalty and confidentiality when it comes to his communications, correct?
Yes.
Now, Ms. Bondi, as Attorney General, one of her first acts, established the Orwellian-sounding weaponization working group. In her memo, it says that the work of this weaponization group will be supported by the Office of the Deputy Attorney General. That is the office that you will occupy. Would you agree that it would be a blatant conflict of interest as his criminal defense lawyer, as someone who has a continuing legal obligation to him as a former client, for you to participate in any of the work of that group as it pertains to the January 6th case that you represented him, or the Mar-a-Lago case where you represent him, or Alvin Bragg's office where you represent him? You would agree that that would be a very blatant conflict of interest?
I don't necessarily agree with that. There will be a conflict of interest potentially, but I quibble with the word blatant. And it depends on,
I mean, take out the word blatant, but isn't it a clear conflict of interest? You've represented him in these cases. You acknowledge you still have a continuing obligation to him in these cases. How could you possibly oversee an investigation or review of the prosecutors in these cases when you handled them? How is that not the most obvious conflict of interest?
I am not saying I can or I cannot. I'm saying I'm not going to say to you today, Senator, yes, there's a blatant conflict of interest.
Well, why?
I don't know what the work is.
Well, can't you acknowledge that if you're asked to supervise cases involving your own cases, that would be a conflict of interest?
That's a very different hypothetical. Certainly.
No, it's not hypothetical. You're subject to the order of the Attorney General now to support that working group. That working group is going to look at the January 6 cases and the Mar-a-Lago case, the cases you worked on. So can you acknowledge it would be a conflict for you to oversee that work?
What I'm not acknowledging is the broad strokes you're giving it. That work, for example. There will be conflicts, and I will not violate my ethical obligations.
Well, let me just ask you with great specificity, will you recuse yourself from overseeing the January 6th case, the Mar-a-Lago case, and the Alvin Bragg case? Will you recuse yourself from the working group's supervision of those investigations?
I will follow the rules as told to me by the experts, career prosecutors in the department when it comes to every recusal.
I've heard that.
But it's true.
Well, it may be true in the abstract.
No, it's not abstract. It's true.
Well, here's the thing, Mr. Blanche, which you well know. You may very well get some opinion of an ethics lawyer appointed by the administration to tell you that you can exercise your discretion. If you believe it's a conflict, you can say you won't participate. If you don't, you can participate. So you may have discretion. So I'm asking you, how will you exercise that discretion? Will you recuse yourself from overseeing an investigation into matters where you were his lawyer. That shouldn't be hard.
You just gave a purely hypothetical, because the hypothetical you just
this
described said that
this is not hypothetical. This is in black and white. It says, and I will read it, I hereby establish the weaponization working group, which will be led by the Office of the Attorney General and supported by the Office of the Deputy Attorney General. So this is what you're going to be asked to do. If you are given the discretion of overseeing cases in which you were his lawyer, will you recuse yourself?
It depends. The hypothetical you just described said that a career ethics attorney tells me I do not have to recuse for whatever reason. Because again, we are talking about hypotheticals. If the career Justice Department attorney says to me, you do not have to recuse yourself, I'm not going to sit here today and say that I will still say I will recuse myself.
I mean, that answers my question. You don't think it's a conflict of interest sufficient that you would sitting here today, tell me
That's
that
not
you
what
were.
I said.
Yeah, no, I get it. I find it remarkable where we are.
Well, you're restating something I didn't say, Senator.
No, I find it remarkable that you feel there's any world in which you could somehow participate in an investigation of people where you represented the president in that same investigation.
I didn't say
Well, if you're not willing to commit to recusal, so that means you're willing to entertain supervising that work. So that tells me something. But let me move on, because I think you've made your position clear. Let me ask you very specifically about the Mar-a-Lago case. The Justice Department formally had recommended Volume 2 be made public. Do you support Volume 2 of the report being made public?
No.
Okay. Do you commit to preserving the evidence in both those investigations?
I commit for sure to following the law and following the rules.
But you won't commit to preserving the evidence. Let's say you have the discretion about destroying the evidence. Do you commit today to preserving the evidence in both those cases?
I commit to following the law.
Okay. And if you can't commit to preserving the evidence in those cases in which you were the defense lawyer, I think, again, that speaks to the conflict of interest that you have as the president's defense lawyer.
I did not commit to it. I said I would follow the law.
No,
I'm not sure. I'm not sure what.
Mr. Blanche, I understand everybody's going to say generically they'll follow the law. But I've asked you a simple question about whether you will preserve evidence, and you can't say yes.
No.
You can't say yes.
I hope every single DOJ attorney, political, career, or anybody, would say they would follow the rules as it
And
regards.
I would hope that any DOJ attorney will say, I will always preserve evidence. There's no circumstance in which I will destroy evidence. That's what I would hope. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
It was one of those Senate moments that makes you stop and ask, are we serious right now? Todd Blanche, Trump's former defense lawyer, sat before the Judiciary Committee, hoping to be confirmed as Deputy Attorney General, the very person who would help lead the Department of Justice. And Adam Schiff wasn't having it. He started with the obvious question, the one everyone watching was thinking, Mr. Blanche, are you still Donald Trump's lawyer? Blanche hesitated, then admitted it. Yes, he said, I still have an attorney-client relationship with President Trump. Let that sink in. Trump's current lawyer, not former, not distant, not retired, still bound by loyalty and confidentiality to the man under multiple criminal investigations, wants to become one of the top enforcers of federal law. Schiff zeroed in, calm but razor sharp. He asked what anyone with common sense would ask. How can someone sworn to represent Donald Trump also be trusted to supervise investigations into Donald Trump? And that's when Blanche's answers started to crumble. He danced around it, saying things like, I'll follow the rules, or I'll listen to career attorneys. But Schiff pressed harder. Will you recuse yourself from the January 6th cases, the Mar-a-Lago case, or any matter connected to Trump? Blanche refused to give a straight answer. He couldn't even commit to preserving evidence in cases he once defended Trump in. Schiff's voice cut through. I would hope any DOJ attorney would say they'd always preserve evidence. And that's the point. This wasn't just about Todd Blanche. It was about the normalization of corruption, the idea that Trump's inner circle can simply slide into positions of power and pretend there's no conflict of interest. Think about it. Blanche didn't just represent Trump. He defended him in the Mar-a-Lago classified documents case and in criminal proceedings tied to January 6th. Now he's applying for a job where he could literally oversee the prosecutors handling those same cases. That's not just a potential conflict, that's a neon red flag flashing danger. Adam Schiff called it exactly what it is, a betrayal of ethical boundaries. He laid it out piece by piece, exposing how absurd it would be for Blanche to supervise a weaponization working group at DOJ, a group that would review the same prosecutions he once fought against. And Blanche's answer? He wouldn't call it a blatant conflict. He wouldn't even acknowledge it as clear. That's not ethics. That's evasion. Because this hearing wasn't about procedure. It was about power and loyalty. Loyalty to the law or loyalty to Trump. And in every answer Todd Blanche gave, it was painfully clear which side he stood on. Schiff didn't need to shout. He didn't need theatrics. He simply held a mirror up to Blanche. And what we saw reflected was a Justice Department on the edge of being hijacked by Trump's loyalists, one nomination at a time. This is what weaponization actually looks like. Not prosecutors following the law, but Trump's defense lawyers trying to run the system from the inside. So here's the real question. If Trump's own lawyer can become the nation's deputy attorney general, what's left of the wall between justice and politics? Adam Schiff made it plain. Ethics can't coexist with allegiance to a defendant, especially this defendant. If you believe the Department of Justice should serve the people, not the powerful, make sure this story doesn't fade into the noise. Like, share, and drop a comment below with your thoughts. Should Todd Blanche be anywhere near the DOJ? And don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss our next deep dive into the fight for accountability in America. Because on Liberal Talk, we don't just cover politics, we expose power.